Please support this channel by subscribing and leaving comments. Stay well, stay safe.
My experience took place back in 1986. This was the first one I had. Before that, I just got interested into it. I had seen the Patterson film myself and got really interested in it. I've read some of John Green's books. I've read also some of Robert Cramp's books, and really got enthused with it, and then started getting a little bit more involved in trying to find one of these creatures. Again, going back to 1986, there was a boy who came in and talked to one of the deputies that he was a friend of. His father owns Bud Lumber in South Bend, Washington. He and a few friends had taken canoes and gone up North River. The mouth of the river flows into Willapa Harbor, and it's about 6 miles up the river to where the area is. You can reach it off Highway 101, and you go into the area. It's about 20 miles from 101 into the timbered area. To give you an idea, it's when you get down, the road dead ends, and its canyon walls run up anywhere from 12 to 1,500 feet high on each side. And in the bottom of this canyon is an area that people camp in down there. Anyway, these fellas had gone up the river there, and on the way up, they got up to what is known as the ox camp in this area. As they started to pull their canoes in and take a rest and get ready to set their camps up, they were being pelted with rocks that ran anywhere from the size of a baseball up to a basketball in size, which they pelted into the rivers. They hollered, and these rocks continued to be thrown at them. And it just hit around them, not deliberately being hit at them. After that, they had went up the river just a little bit further, and of course the rocks had quit being thrown at them. And they set up their camp. They knew that there was something that was around, but they never did see. And they thought maybe it was somebody pulling some pranks. So they, when they got into the beach, they went out toward the road that runs down there, and there was no cars, absolutely nobody around. And so they were just really curious, as to who was doing this or what was doing this. So they stayed, they camped that night. They had no other problems at all. And the next day, when they decided they would leave, they could hear something in the brush. They could hear the twigs, limbs, and stuff popping and breaking, but they didn't explore any more than that. They got in their canoes and left. This story was told to me. So I got curious and decided I would go up in that area and take a look around. A friend of mine, Wayne Moore, and I, we took one evening and drove up into the country, and we had found a beaver that was laying off the side of the road in the same area, and it had literally been torn into pieces. And we found the tail section had been cast to the side, and so they got our curiosity up. We'd like to look a little bit more, so we decided we'd camp the weekend down. This was in the end of August. When this took place.
Excuse me, Fred, were you also camping at the Ox Camp?
Yes. Yeah, we'd gone down into that area by my son and his dog and my stepsister and myself. We decided we'd camp down there on that weekend. Wayne couldn't make it because he had some other thing he had to do. So we got down there and set up camp. It was a beautiful evening. It was around 4 o'clock when we got there. And there was, like I said, just a beautiful evening. So my son and I decided we would go fishing. Well, during this time that we decided this, he's got a Doberman that he had with him, and this dog is whining and crying and just carrying on. It just, if it could have jumped in your arms, it would have, just to get away from whatever it was bothering. And this kept up most of the night. My son was getting really upset with his dog because of the way it was acting. And so we fished that night on the river. Well, we could hear up on the hill above us, you could hear the rocks rolling, like something was moving down the hill. As we were brought toward dark, and fishing was terrible anyway, we noticed along the beach there were piles of rocks that were kind of pyramided up, and all around the rocks were crawdad shells, freshwater clams that had been broken over these rocks and left there. As something had eaten them. And there was about 4 piles of these that were down the river bed. And so anyway, we came back up and we were sitting there talking, and it was getting toward dark. It was about, I'd say around 6 or 7. My sister Carol said, you know, there's something around here. I can't figure out what it is, but I catch it out of the corner of my eye. It's like something is moving, you know, and it ducked down out of the side. And so we just kind of watched a little bit. Of course, never did see anything at that time. As it went along, it was after dark. It was about, I'd say, around 8:30. There was a noise we could hear in the brush, like a lot of sticks popping. We could hear daybirds in there, chickadee, that type of wrens, different bird sounds. Then all of a sudden, we heard this loud crash, and this limb was broken out of a alder tree. It was about 30 feet long, about 6 inches in diameter, crashing to the ground. And we heard this swishing sound. So we all jumped up and moved away from the black area that we were sitting with our back to. And we just kind of stood there for a moment. And I decided that, you know, if it's something in there, or bear, or whatever, I was going to get my rifle. I had a 7 Magnum with me. I went in the tent and got it, and I come out. At that time, the dog was really cutting up some more barking, growling, and carrying on. My son decided he wanted his radio because he wasn't going to let anything tear it up, so he walked over to pick it up. I had an 8-cell flashlight laying there on the table. And he picked up the flashlight and shined it through the wood area in the back of where we were camped. And he goes, "Oh my God, look at this, Dad." About that time, Carol and myself, we walked up. And what we saw was a large creature that was standing there with its face hidden behind a fir tree. Couldn't see the face at all, but we could see the body. I estimated to be approximately 8 feet in height, weighed around 600 to 800 pounds. The head was kind of pointed at the top, had long hair. Its arms had to come down to its body that I could see. The upper arm was approximately 18 inches in diameter, and it came down to a chest, which was, I would guess, be maybe 4 foot through, from back to the chest. The lower thigh area on the legs were, I would say, 21 to 22 inches in diameter, and carried down. The arm, it had one arm that hung down. The fingers hung past the knee as it just stood there. And what I saw there, and I looked at the rifle I had in my hand, I laid the rifle back in the truck because I knew it wasn't big enough. And at this time, we all turned to each other, and I said, "Let's gather up our stuff, we're getting out of here." And it took us about 45 minutes to set camp up. It took us only 7 minutes to take it out. The creature itself was cedar bark brown in color.
You would just stand there, look at you
It was just seconds, yeah, that we saw it there, and I just had, through my experience in law enforcement, was able to, catch a lot of detail that most people probably wouldn't be able to catch. Not the face, I couldn't see it at all. Never made any sounds at all. It just moved off and was gone. It was just, I could guess, maybe at the very longest, maybe in 40 seconds.
The odor?
Yes, there was. It was very strong odor. It burned your nose. It was like a combination of PC, sweat, just a nasty combination.
Not a decaying flesh.
Somewhat, yes. Yeah, like I said, it just burned your nose.
When it moved off, did it move off very quickly or slowly?
It moved quickly. It was out of sight.
On that beaver carcass, was meat all eaten away? Just the tail and the legs?
It had been just literally mangled and tore apart.
No meat left?
No, it was very little, if any, it was on the carcass.
Like something that ate the carcass and left the hide and tail and
Right, yeah,
the skull there?
I did recall seeing the head or itself.
And what distance, Fred?
What I estimated was, making a rough guess at it at the time, was about 50, 60 feet away. When we went back the following day and went in there, we found some footprints in our camp area. And there were two different sets. One was approximately 14 inches long. The other was closer to 17 or 18 inches. They weren't, the ground was so hard it wasn't enough to get any casting from, just the impressions were there on the ground. When we measured where the creature was standing, it was 120 feet. The height that I estimated when it was 6'2" compared to a limb, it was 10 1/4 feet in height.
10 1/4 feet.
That, you're saying that would have been the head height?
Yes.
How long was its hair?
I estimate anywhere from, rough, say, 6 inches to smaller.
All over or just
It was all over, yeah.
What was the circumference on the thighs?
I estimated between 21 and 22 inches.
Did you have an opportunity to see the muscle structure at all?
Just very briefly.
Can you describe it at all?
Very muscular. Like I said, it moved very quickly after the filter was in the line.
Were the muscles large and
Yes,
bulky?
very large.
They weren't elongated?
It's a long, yeah. It could well be.
Did it closely resemble the Patterson boots at all, somewhat? Or?
Yes. Yes.
And Fred, this was at night, it was in the dark, and your sole illumination was the flashlight?
Yeah.
60
No
feet.
flashlights. Yes. Yes.
You said you couldn't see the face,
No.
but you
Could see through the ear and down to where its head sat right on the shoulders. It didn't have much of a neck.
So you saw it, your wife saw it, and your boy saw it?
My son and my stepsister, yes.
Okay, your stepsister. And the thing, was it literally in the bush, outside of the clearing?
No, it was in a wooded area, but it was outside of the brush, just standing behind a large fir tree. The tree that it was standing, there was two cedar that run up and split, and then it was right behind that.
Did you feel threatened?
I didn't feel threatened. I felt that we were not welcome in the area. The dog, it just went crazy. And as soon as we broke camp, or when we left, the dog settled down. They finally laid down.
Well, you were actually picking up the bits and pieces of your gear. Where was the dog?
Oh, the dog, my son had a hold of the dog. The dog was trying to break and go toward the river. It was growling. It probably would have, attacked whatever was out there. Yes.
You were located about how far from Highway 101 compared to the mouth of the river
We were about 6 miles from the mouth of the river and 20 miles from the 101.
101.
Yes.
Fred, could you say again how you estimated that head height?
We measured, well, there were some limbs on the tree that overhung, and I just made a judgment of where its head was, and then after that we've gone in with it and measured. Okay.
You mentioned that you were a retired police officer?
Yes.
In Grace Harbor?
Yes.
In your past experience, have you ever interviewed anybody else that in the area and seen one of these or footprints?
They have been with the sheriff's department that have had footprints taken. Also, one of the deputies that worked there also had an experience with Bigfoot.
So this isn't your first, that wasn't your first?
That was my first. No, I've had 2 others since then. Previous, yeah.
You talked about the Capelas incident.
Right, yeah. The one in Palis, also the one up on the DK Road.
Yeah.
And there that Deputy Harrison
Yeah.
was involved with.
More questions for Fred? I'm wondering if Fred's stepsister has anything to add to the sighting. This is she, right?
Ollie and I was the only one that didn't want to leave.
Good for you.
But I thought these guys just stay there, and they said, no, we're not going to stay, we're going. But I did. I wanted to stay real bad.
Bunch of webs.
Did you take any photographs, Russians?
I had the camera with me at the time, but I didn't have a flash unit, so I couldn't get anything at that time. The next day, yes, we did. We took the impressions and laid newspaper over. There were several footprints.
But you took photos, then?
Yes,
Sorry, I didn't get your name. I had your name.
Fred Bradshaw.
Bradshaw.
Just one question. Sure. Okay. What's your son's, what are your son's recollections of this sighting?
Yeah. Also, when we left the area up there to get back to it, I asked each one of us, I said, don't say anything to each other until we get home. And I said, I want you to take a piece of paper and sketch what you saw and also write what you saw. Each one of us went into a separate room, and this is what we did. We wrote down, we also sketched. We gave them to Wayne Moore and compared them, and they were identical.
Good for you. I'm impressed. Tyler.
One more.
So, Fred, you mentioned you had a rifle.
Yes.
It came about during this incident with Sasquatch.
I had it with me in my hand during the time that the creature was there. And like I said, I looked at the rifle and the size of that creature that was out there. And knowing basically that looking at the chest area and the muscle plate on there would be approximately 8 inches, I would say, thickness on its chest. That rifle would not slow it down. Right. Yes.
I've got a question for you. When you see people, you see like they look happy, they look sad, they look angry. When you saw this thing, what expression did it convey to you?
I would say more of curiosity. That's where my feelings lived. Like I said, what we had seen of it with the flashlight on it was during the day that I had seen about from here up of something. Every once in a while I go to look and it wasn't registering until this whole encounter came to be, and then it come back, it dawned on me that there was something watching us all day long. When you catch it out with something watching, you look and it would disappear. And I'm still waiting for the person that can take what I tell them and make a sketch of what I saw that's still vivid in my mind.
Did I misunderstand? I thought you said the face was not visible in your evening sighting?
No, we did not see the face of that.
And so your impression of attitude or curiosity or whatever, that was based on what you saw during the daytime? But you hadn't really figured out that it was a face at that time?
Right.
And yet going back, you could not only think that it's a face, but also imagine that you saw a, not imagine, but figure out that you saw actually an attitude or a feeling out of it.
All right. Oh, I just had one, maybe, I mean, you said that the face was covered for the most part, but did you feel it, I mean, was it like leaning and then going back? I mean, maybe that's where curiosity might have come from, that it was trying to just check you out, but it didn't make any aggressive
Yeah, what we got was like there's a tree, and if you were, say you were standing alongside of a tree and somebody was shining a light in your face, you try to move to,
Right.
so you could focus in at that time.
Well, thank you very much. Good folks, you're very well. Another gentleman that's been looking for Sasquatch for a long time, Rene Dahinden, are you here somewhere?
Are you sure?
Got number 3 on my list. Put you right there in the...
He would drive as a police officer. He was the only You better pick up. Somebody else can get the scoop.
Still there. Doing too much. I believe this size.
You're on, sir.
I am not going to talk about the Sasquatch encounters. I'm going to talk about the evidence which they're supposed to leave behind. There are two types of evidence you can test. Evidence meaning evidence. That's one of them is footprints, and the other is film evidence or photos. You can't test people's eyewitness accounts or historical evidence. They're just stories as such. There was only one film taken, and that's the Patterson film ever in the history of all history reports, that the art film which stood up to rigorous investigation. There were many fake films made in the past. There's the art photo floating around, and they're also so. So what we have is footprints. I'm talking really to some of the people in this room here. If you're a Sasquatch researcher, you better know something about footprints. If you don't, my advice to you is take your little bucket and play in the sand down there. Because we're fooling ourselves if you don't know about traps. Let me give you a background to this footprints here. This fakery goes on now for 12 years. There's a fellow by the name of Paul Freeman in Walla Walla, southeastern corner of Washington. Got a job as a watershed patrol rider, means he was riding in a pickup on horse, around the watershed of the city of Walla Walla, patrolling the area so nobody would go in there and disturb the water supply. Got there thousands of elk in there, or at least hundreds of them didn't seem to bother him. You know, that kind of amazing. Anyway, he got employed end of May of 1982. He came to the job within a few days. Now, when I go to an area, I talk to everybody on its dog. Interview anybody I could think of and hear of. So I talked to the person who showed Freeman the road, where to patrol, what to do, and whatever. This fellow told me, he said, Freeman no sooner got here, he starts talking about Bigfoot. You know, and Freeman then turned around later, he said, oh, I never was interested in Bigfoot. Anyway, a few days later, June the 10th, Freeman was riding on it with a pickup up the road, and here he sees Bigfoot. Found tracks, quote unquote. Big excitement. 6 days later, he found some more footprints. Him and another watershed rider, on horseback this time. Freeman said, let's have lunch. So we got off the horses. Then Freeman said, well, there's a better place further down. No, let's go over here. And sure enough, there was some more Bigfoot footprints down there. Some of these footprints that turned out to have skin pattern on, thermal edges. By then, the Forest Service got kind of fed up, and they called in a U.S. Border Patrol tracker, which had 15, 20 years experience of tracking aliens along the Mexican borders, Mexican crossing over. He's recognized as one of the top trackers on the Pacific coast here. He's giving tracking classes from Alaska to California, the law enforcement agency, rescue services. I mean, the guy apparently is the tops. Anyway, the Forest Service called him in. He looked at the tracks. The Forest Service looked at the tracks. He wrote the reports and said the tracks are fake. Then here we have a track with thermal ridges on skin pattern. The tracks, to come back to the tracks, they didn't sink into the ground as much as the Forest Service did, beside it. You could see where the debris was removed, track jiggled in there, lengths of the step, on and on and on and on. But they decided the tracks were fake. Freeman then hopped on his horse and disappeared and quit. Took him a while to come back and pick up his check or whatever. Freeman then kept on going, more tracks, more tracks, more tracks. The latest one was about the 20th of April of this year. Unsolved Mystery Group decided to come and film a segment down in Mount Hood. And lo and behold, Freeman found tracks in Walla Walla. Very convenient. He faked some films, he did this, he did that. Well, anyway, this is something. In '87, I decided enough of this damn nonsense. I never went down in the meantime. I said, because some other people interviewed Freeman and they declared him to be an out-and-out liar. So I said, why should I bother and go down there? So anyway, '87, I decided enough of this. Hopped in my truck and drove to Walla Walla. I think I was there 7 weeks. Some of the times I spent up in the hills, running around, camped up there in my truck, my trail bike, trails down the ridges, here, there. Rest of the time I spent in town, talking to everybody I could find, background checking on Freeman itself, if there were previous track reports, a whole background thing. On November the 1st, I was way down someplace, just came back from walking way down into an area there. Didn't find anything at any time. Met some hunters who were hunting in there for the last 20 some odd years. They never saw anything. On the way back, got very foggy rolling in. I had a heck of a time finding my way back. The next day it was very foggy. Could barely see the road. That's very important. But I saw as the fog lifted, Freeman came driving around up the road. And he couldn't see me going up the road. But then he came back and he saw my truck camped there. So he came over and blah, blah, blah. Next morning he came back. And there was elk season on in that area. There were hunters all over the place. And they opened the watershed to elk season for, I don't know, a week or whatever. But 200-300 permits are given out. Anyway, 2 hunters came walking along where I was camped. Freeman was there, and Freeman said, I'm driving up the road. You want to come along? I said, no, I'm going some other place. But he took these 2 hunters with him, because they would camp further up. So up the road they went, and Freeman told him, he told me afterwards, let's go up the road a little ways, I'll show you where I found all these Bigfoot tracks. So he drove up the road, came back, and Freeman said, wow, look at that, the bank up here, here are some Bigfoot tracks. So everybody jumped out, looked at them, and then the hunters were back to their camp. Freeman came and got me. So I went up there. And of course, by then the alarm bells weren't just ringing, they were whacking me on the head. You know? And, yeah. Anyway, I went up there. There were 5 footprints there, and further up the road were 2 more. So I looked at all these tracks. Freeman then was supposed to go, which he did, run down into town to get some plaster repairs and disappear. Didn't come back till the next day. Now here we have this typical Walla tracks. Here is one which is found on the top, which was up on the top road where it was very fine dust. The ground in that area is what they call loess, I think, L-O-E-S, maybe I misspelled it, very fine. And I took my shoes off and my socks and put my foot in the dust right beside this tracks, and I looked and I could see all my skin pattern in my foot. I have to go very close because it's very fine. Now here you have a quote-unquote Sasquatch tracks. Look at the crazy toe arrangements to begin with. There isn't a piece of skin pattern here. Nothing. Silk. The absence of skin pattern on this track, number 1, right there shows, forget the rest, that they're fake. But as I blew out some dust, the track is like this. Here, out of the hole where the toes are, I blew a little dirt away. There was a ridge of dirt up here. Blew a little dirt away. And here was a piece of dirt with skin pattern on it, because I was way down, you know, on the ground, blowing this little debris out here. There was a skin pattern there on a piece of dirt. The guy tapped it down, then sprinkled some more dirt on top. I also, with some other people who came up, we loosened up the ground a little bit and just went like this, big, and we had the footprint. You know, we didn't fool around much. Further down, we found this track. This is number 2, a left, a right foot, as you can see. This is the next one over. Now, there are about 3 billion people in the world. Each one of these people has the same amount of bones in the foot, I assume. And the same amount and the same structure. You see, for example, this track here, you can see where the toes were flush, fully stretched out, not like this, gripping the ground, but fully stretched out. See here? Come back here to here, here to here, here to here. Now this is the same track later on, where the little toe moved up here, you know. The little toe moved from here up here, and this one went some other place. You see? You know, then you have this one here. In another place, he put a rock in here by the toe. You know, where you got the toe, and then you put the rock in where I guess the dirt is supposed, the skin's supposed to move over. He pulled all that stuff before by the thousands of tracks. So what I'm saying is, if you investigate tracks, forget the depths in the ground, the length of the step, and everything else, till you determine if anatomy-wise, if between each track, left and right, if the bone structure are reasonable in there. You know, I mean, nothing is moving from here up to here in a natural foot. So that's, you know, that's Walla Walla. And some people say about determining the reality or the genuineness of tracks. How can you tell? Well, you can't really, because we don't know if the Sasquatch exists. I never saw one, so I'm like anybody else who didn't see one. But we should be able to determine blatant fakes and eliminate them and put a stop to the fakers. Because it doesn't do this research any good carrying on peddling fake tracks. Because we're all getting thrown in the same damn pot as morons who don't know any damn better. I get very annoyed about it, as you can see.
No.
Well, after 30, 40 years, Jesus, you would think somebody, I'm no expert on tracks, but I think I can tell a fake one, blatant fake one. So anyway, that's,
Thank you. Questions?
What's Mr. Freeman doing now?
Making more tracks.
He has a career. Yeah, you said the only evidence is tracks and pictures, but what about hair and droppings?
Hair and droppings, when you're out in the bush, you find droppings, they could be as well be there, I never picked up any hair. If you have nothing to compare it with.
There was a thing called a ground sloth that used to live in the mountains. And they do have examples of its hair, and they do have examples of its droppings. I was wondering if anybody has ever checked hair and droppings against a ground sloth.
Not that I know.
Okay, so there's none. Any other questions for Rene?
Yeah, in 1982, when all this initially went down, some of the major publications in the United States, they heard Grover Krantz, dermal ridges, this is the best evidence ever, and they just, boom, get it into print. And they did it again and again and again in major publications, and it's just like everywhere over hell's half acre, they said, these have got to be real. What do you think in terms of the press and the media? Obviously they jumped the gun. Is that?
They're not there to analyze tracks. We are supposed to. Yeah. Now, if the press or the reporters, there are regular reporters who interview you and tell the story, okay? Your story. And then you have investigative reporting, like the guy from the Pacific Northwest magazine who investigates. And there were very few investigative reporters ever did a real investigative story on all these things, Most of them really don't like to get too nasty, which is too bad. But then, yeah, there's going to be a real nasty article coming out in September. I mean, devastating about this stuff.
Do you know where it's going to be published?
Well, I tell you, you will find out.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I was wondering, have you been back to the Bluff Creek area lately?
I was there in October for a month.
And anything to report?
It's all overgrown, the banks are washed away to a considerable amount, It's, you probably wouldn't even find it if you never were there, and even if you were there and weren't there for a long time, you wouldn't even, there's alder all over the place, and maple and everything else, and there's just a small strip of sand left in there. And I was there so often that this was, but it wouldn't help you any because you wouldn't see anything anymore. The work was done there, over the years.
But as far as finding any evidence of tracks there now,
I run all over the place in there for a whole month, up and down the side hills, over here, over there. Talk to Forest Service people. They don't log there anymore anyway. I didn't see any. And they said no reports of any kind whatsoever.
I have two questions. One, I want to know what Sasquatch means. And two, are you a true skeptic? Do you think this is not a living beast, or are you ambivalent?
A skeptic is a person who asks questions and is cynical, skeptical, analytical. That's a skeptic. There are another type of skeptic who just babble away without knowing what the heck they're doing. You find them on TV stations all day. You know, it's true. A true skeptic you should pay attention to is a guy who studied what he's skeptical about it. I mean, you go down to Burkina Faso in East Africa and tell a guy the world is round, the Australian are down the other side, he wouldn't believe you. So that's many of the skeptics that just say there is no Sasquatch over and out, and, you know. But I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical.
Sasquatch means.
If you're enjoying all this rare and unique content, please show your support by subscribing and leaving comments. Stay safe, stay well.